Commander Zethkar stood on the bridge of the massive warship Dominion's edge, his four arms clasped behind his chitinous back as he watched the blue marble of Earth spinning slowly below. The planet looked peaceful from this distance, almost innocent, but he knew better. For 3 months, his fleet of 200 vessels had maintained orbital superiority over the human homeworld, and the pathetic creatures below had finally begun to understand their place in the cosmic order. The communications officer, a younger hegemony soldier named Vixtal, approached with obvious excitement. Her scales shimmered with the purple hue that indicated good news among their species. "Commander, we're receiving transmissions from the human governments. They appear to be withdrawing their military forces." Zethkar's mandibles clicked in what his species considered laughter. He turned from the viewport, his 6 eyes focusing on the holographic display that showed Earth's surface. Across every continent, thermal signatures indicated massive troop movements. Military bases that had been bustling with activity just days ago were now showing reduced heat signatures. Fighter jets were landing and staying grounded. Naval vessels were returning to port. "Show me the primary transmission," he commanded. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a tired-looking human in military dress. The creature's pale skin and small, round eyes made it appear fragile and weak. When it spoke, the translation matrix converted its primitive sounds into proper hegemony speech. "To the forces occupying Earth's orbital space," the human began, after careful consideration and, to prevent unnecessary loss of life, the unified Earth governments have decided to stand down all military operations. "We are withdrawing our forces and request negotiation for terms of surrender." The bridge erupted in the chittering sounds that served as applause among the crew. Zethkar raised one of his primary arms for silence, though his mandibles continued to click with amusement. 3 months, he said to no one in particular. It took these weak creatures only 3 months to realize they cannot match the might of the hegemony. He turned to his tactical officer. "Krindus, show me the withdrawal patterns." The tactical display revealed a planet-wide retreat. Human military forces were pulling back from every strategic position. Missile silos were powering down. Air defense systems were going offline. It was exactly what Zethkar had expected from such a primitive species. "Sir," Vixtal interjected, "should we respond to their request for negotiation?" Zethkar's laugh was a harsh, grating sound that filled the bridge. "Negotiate? With these creatures?" He gestured dismissively toward the planet below. "They have nothing to offer us. Their technology is thousands of years behind ours. Their weapons cannot even penetrate our basic shielding. What could they possibly bring to a negotiation?" He moved to his command chair, a towering structure that elevated him above the rest of the bridge crew. From this position, he could see every display, every officer, every detail of his ship's operations. The Dominion's edge was a kilometer long and bristled with enough firepower to sterilize a continent. It was one of the smaller vessels in his fleet. "Open a channel to all human governments," he ordered. The communications array hummed to life, broadcasting his message to every capital on Earth. When the connection was established, Zethkar stood to address the conquered world. "Humans of Earth," he began, his translated voice booming across every government facility on the planet. "I am Commander Zethkar of the Galactic Hegemony. Your decision to withdraw your pathetic military forces shows the first spark of intelligence your species has demonstrated since our arrival." He paused, savoring the moment. Below him, 7 billion creatures were listening to his words, knowing that their fate rested in his hands. "However, you misunderstand your situation if you believe this is a matter for negotiation. The hegemony does not negotiate with primitive species. You have 2 options: submit completely to our authority or face complete extermination. Your military withdrawal is meaningless. Your weapons could not harm us even if you had the courage to use them." The tactical display showed increased activity in several human population centers. Fear, most likely. Perhaps panic. It was exactly the response he wanted. "You have 48 of your planetary rotations to prepare for full integration into the hegemony." Resistance will be met with immediate and total destruction. Your leaders will present themselves for assignment of duties. Your population will be cataloged and assigned roles appropriate to your capabilities. He gestured for the communication to be cut, then turned to his crew with satisfaction. The conquest of Earth would be recorded as one of the most efficient in hegemony history. Most primitive worlds required some show of force, some demonstration of superior firepower. The humans had simply looked up at his fleet and surrendered. "Commander," Krindus called from his station, "I'm detecting some unusual electromagnetic activity from the planet's surface." Zethkar's attention shifted to the tactical display. Across Earth's surface, new energy signatures were appearing. Not the heat signatures of military equipment, something else entirely. "Define unusual," he demanded. "The signatures don't match any known human technology in our databases. The energy output is significant, but the pattern is unlike anything they've demonstrated before." A chill ran through Zethkar's consciousness, though he dismissed it quickly. The humans were probably trying some desperate last gambit, perhaps activating their primitive nuclear weapons in a final show of defiance. It would be pointless, of course. His ship's defensive systems could handle anything these creatures might throw at them. "Maintain monitoring," he ordered. "If they're fool enough to attack us after announcing surrender, they'll simply confirm their own extinction." On the planet below, the energy signatures continued to grow stronger. They appeared to be centered around major population centers, but also in remote locations that showed no previous signs of human activity. Zethkar found it mildly interesting, but not concerning. In all his years of conquest, he had seen desperate species try everything from biological weapons to electromagnetic pulses to crude nuclear devices. Nothing had ever so much as scratched the paint on a hegemony vessel. "Sir," Vixtal reported, "I'm receiving additional human transmissions. Multiple sources, all repeating the same message." "What do they say?" "Thank you for making this easy. We really didn't want to have to hunt you down." The bridge fell silent. Zethkar stared at the communications officer, certain he had misunderstood. "Repeat that." "The message is, thank you for making this easy. We really didn't want to have to hunt you down." It's being broadcast from thousands of locations simultaneously. For the first time in the campaign, Zethkar felt genuine confusion. The humans had surrendered. They had withdrawn their forces. Their leaders had requested terms. What could they possibly mean by "Commander"? Krindus shouted from tactical. Energy spike from the surface. Massive readings across all spectrums. The main display automatically switched to show Earth's electromagnetic profile. The planet was lit up like a star, energy pouring from thousands of points across its surface. The readings were unlike anything in Zethkar's experience. Not the crude fusion reactions of human technology, but something far more sophisticated. "What is the source?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir. The energy patterns they're actually quite advanced. More advanced than our own power generation methods." Before Zethkar could respond, every alarm on the bridge began screaming at once. "Incoming transmission." Vixtal called over the noise. "Source unknown. Put it through." The main screen flickered and resolved into the image of a human female. But something was different about this one. Her eyes held an intelligence that seemed far beyond what the species should possess. And when she spoke, it was without the hesitation and fear that had marked every previous human communication. "Commander Zethkar," she said calmly, "allow me to introduce myself. I am Dr. Sarah Chun, and I represent the actual governing body of Earth. What you've been talking to for the past 3 months were our public representatives." Zethkar's mandibles stopped clicking. "Impossible. Our intelligence clearly shows—" "Your intelligence shows what we wanted it to show," Dr. Chen interrupted. "The military withdrawal you're so pleased about? That was us clearing the board for what comes next." The energy readings from Earth's surface spiked again, and this time, Zethkar could feel it through the ship's hull, a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Dr. Chen's image remained steady on the screen as chaos erupted around Zethkar. Warning lights bathed the bridge in red, and the constant hum of the ship's power systems began to fluctuate in ways that should have been impossible. "You see, Commander," she continued conversationally, as if she were discussing the weather rather than addressing the leader of an invasion fleet. "We've had visitors before. Not many people know about them. We've gotten quite good at keeping secrets over the centuries. The hegemony isn't the first galactic empire to notice Little Earth." Zethkar's four arms moved frantically over his control systems. "Krendush, report. What's happening to our power grid?" The tactical officer's scales had shifted to the pale yellow of fear. "Sir, I'm reading massive gravitational distortions around the fleet. Something is interfering with our quantum field generators." "That's impossible," Zethkar snarled. "Human technology cannot." "Human technology?" Dr. Chen laughed, and the sound was not the terrified, whimpering Zethkar had expected. It was confident, almost pitying. "Commander, I think you fundamentally misunderstood what you're dealing with." The ship shuddered. Not from weapons fire. Zethkar knew what that felt like, but from something far more disturbing. The Dominion's edge was being affected by forces that his instruments couldn't properly identify. "Sir," Vixtal called from communications. "I'm receiving reports from the entire fleet. All ships are experiencing power fluctuations. The destroyer's fist reports their weapons systems are completely offline." Through the viewport, Zethkar could see other ships in his fleet. Their running lights were flickering, and some of the smaller vessels appeared to be drifting out of formation. The sight sent ice through his veins. Hegemony technology didn't simply fail. It was designed by a civilization that had conquered half the galaxy. "Let me explain something to you," Dr. Chan said, her voice cutting through the noise of alarms and panicked reports. "About 800 years ago, we had another visitor, a pro from a species called the Architects. They were testing us, seeing if we were ready for what they call the next phase of development. The main power grid fluctuated again, and half the bridge displays went dark for several seconds before emergency power restored them. We failed their test rather spectacularly," she continued. "Medieval technology, tribal warfare, barely understood our own planet. So they left us what they called training wheels, a set of technologies hidden around the globe, designed to activate when we were threatened by someone technologically superior to ourselves." Zethkar's mind raced. The Architects were a name whispered in fear throughout hegemony space. An ancient species that had vanished from the galaxy millions of years ago, leaving behind only ruins that no one could fully understand. If the humans had access to Architect technology— "You're lying," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "The beautiful thing about the system," Dr. Chen said, ignoring his protest, "is that it's completely passive until activated by hostile intent from an advanced species. Your ships, your weapons, your presence in our space with conquest in mind, all of that triggered protocols that have been dormant for centuries." The ship lurched violently to one side. Through the viewport, Zethkar watched in horror as one of his destroyer-class vessels simply stopped. Every light on the ship died simultaneously. It hung in space like a dead hulk, its massive bulk now no more threatening than a piece of space debris. "What have you done?" he whispered. "We haven't done anything, Commander. The Architect's gift is autonomous. It identifies threats to Earth and neutralizes them, not by destroying them. That would be wasteful. By simply making them harmless." More reports flooded in from across the fleet. Weapons systems failing. Propulsion systems shutting down. Life support operating normally, but every system related to warfare or aggression simply ceasing to function. "Our scans show your ships are powered by controlled quantum cascade reactions," Dr. Chen continued, as if she were giving a lecture rather than dismantling an invasion fleet. "Quite sophisticated, actually, several centuries ahead of what we can build ourselves. The Architect's systems are simply convincing your reactors that they don't want to power weapons anymore." Zethkar turned to Krendus. "Can we jump to hyperspace? Retreat from the system?" The tactical officer's hands moved over his controls, then stopped. His scales had gone completely white. "Sir, navigation systems are responding normally, but The hyperspace drive is reading as offline. Not damaged, just unwilling to function. That's because Dr. Chun said, and somehow she had heard his question despite the communication being on the ship's internal channel. The systems recognize that you came here to harm us. The architects were quite thorough in their definition of threats. Any technology being used with hostile intent toward Earth becomes reluctant to continue functioning. The bridge around Zethkar was slowly going dark. Not a catastrophic failure, but a systematic shutdown of everything except life support and basic ship operations. His crew stood at their stations, but their controls no longer responded to their commands. "This is impossible," he said, more to himself than to anyone else. "We are the galactic hegemony. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. Our technology is supreme in this sector of space." "Your technology is impressive," Dr. Chin agreed. "But the architects were building starships when your species was still learning to make fire. They scattered their gifts across the galaxy, worlds that could serve as tests for younger species. Earth is one of them, a planet that looks helpless and primitive until something threatens it." Through the viewports, Zethkar could see his entire fleet hanging motionless in space. 200 warships, carrying enough firepower to reduce continents to ash, now floating like debris. Only their life support systems continue to function, keeping his crews alive, but completely powerless. "The military withdrawal you witnessed wasn't surrender," Dr. Chen explained. "It was us getting our people out of the way so the architect's systems could activate without interference. We couldn't tell you about it beforehand. The systems only respond to genuine threats. If you had known what was waiting for you, you might have approached differently, and the protocols wouldn't have engaged." Zethkar slumped in his command chair. In his 3 decades of conquest, he had never encountered anything like this. Species either fought with inferior technology and were crushed, or they possessed superior technology and did the crushing. This passive neutering of his entire fleet was beyond his understanding. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Now, Dr. Chun said, we talk. Real talk. About why you're here, what you want, and how we can resolve this without anyone dying. The architect systems won't harm your crews as long as they pose no threat to Earth. Your ship's life support will function indefinitely, but your weapons will never work in this system again." On the tactical display, Earth continued to glow with energy signatures that Zethkar now realized were far beyond anything his civilization could produce. Ancient technology, dormant for centuries, had awakened at the approach of his fleet. The planet he had thought defenseless was protected by the most advanced species in galactic history. "You could have told us," he said finally, before we made fools of ourselves." Dr. Chin's expression softened slightly. "Commander, in the past 800 years, 17 different species have arrived at Earth with conquest in mind. 12 of them turned around and left when they saw our orbital defenses activate. 3 of them attempted to negotiate once they understood what they were facing. 2 others tried to fight anyway and had their ships permanently disabled." She paused, letting that sink in. "You're the first ones who bothered to actually occupy our orbital space for months before making your ultimatum. We were curious to see how long it would take you to realize that our apparent helplessness was an act." The last of the bridge's tactical displays went dark. Zethkar sat in his command chair, surrounded by inactive instruments, wondering how he would explain this to the Hegemony High Command. "How do you report that your entire invasion fleet was neutralized by a species you thought was primitive? The question now," Dr. Chen continued, "is what you want to do next. Your ships can leave Earth's system anytime you choose, once you've abandoned any hostile intentions. The architect's technology can tell the difference between retreat and strategic repositioning. If you genuinely leave in peace, your ships will function normally once you're beyond our solar system's edge." Zethkar looked around his silent bridge. His crew stared at their dead instruments, their proud warship reduced to a passenger liner with no destination. "And if we stay?" he asked. Dr. Chun smiled, and for the first time since this nightmare began, Zethkar saw genuine warmth in her expression. If you stay, Commander, then we have a lot to discuss. Starting with why the galactic hegemony feels the need to conquer primitive worlds in the first place. 3 days later, Zethkar found himself in a place he never could have imagined. Sitting in a comfortable chair in what the humans called a conference room, aboard a transport shuttle that had been permitted to dock with the Dominion's edge. Across from him sat Dr. Chun and 3 other humans who had introduced themselves as representatives of something called the Hidden Council. The irony wasn't lost on him. The most powerful invasion fleet in this sector of the galaxy had been immobilized by what amounted to an automatic security system. And now he was having tea, actual tea, a human beverage, while discussing the future of interstellar relations. The architects left similar gifts on 47 worlds throughout the galaxy. Dr. Chun was explaining, her hands wrapped around her own cup. We've been in contact with most of them for the past 2 centuries. Quietly, of course. The various galactic empires tend to get nervous when they realize there are protected worlds they can't conquer. Zethkar's mandibles clicked softly, a sign of deep thought among his species. How many empires have you been observing? All of them, said Dr. Martinez, one of the other council members. He was an elderly human with gray hair and kind eyes that somehow seemed far older than his apparent age. The hegemony, the Void dynasties, the Crystal Alliance, the Machine Collective. We've been watching galactic politics for quite some time. Watching for what? Patterns, Dr. Chin replied. The architects didn't just leave defensive systems, Commander. They left observers. Species that could monitor the development of galactic civilization and report back when certain conditions were met. The implications hit Zethkar like a physical blow. Report back to whom? The architects vanished millions of years ago. Dr. Chun and Dr. Martinez exchanged a look that seemed to carry volumes of unspoken communication. Did they? Dr. Chun asked quietly. The conference room fell silent except for the soft hum of the shuttle's life support systems. Outside the small viewport, Zethkar could see his fleet, still powerless, still floating like abandoned monuments to his hubris. You're saying the architects are still alive? He whispered. We're saying that a species capable of building technology that can operate autonomously for millions of years might have other surprises in store for the galaxy. Dr. Martinez replied carefully. What we know for certain is that we 47 worlds are approaching a threshold, a point where the architect's original plan moves to its next phase. Dr. Chin leaned forward. Tell me, Commander, in your conquest of 1,000 worlds, how many of those species have you encountered again? The question seemed random until Zethkar really thought about it. What do you mean? I mean, after you conquer a world and integrate it into the hegemony, do those species ever advance technologically? Do they ever become partners rather than subjects? Do they ever contribute anything meaningful to galactic civilization? Zethkar's silence was answer enough. The hegemony conquers and consumes, Dr. Chun continued. You take resources, labor, and occasionally useful technologies, but you don't actually foster growth or development in the species you conquer. You keep them dependent and primitive. That's how empire works, Zethkar protested, though his voice lacked conviction. According to the architect's records, that's how empire fails, Dr. Martinez said gently. Every major galactic civilization follows the same pattern. Expand, conquer, consume, stagnate, collapse. The galaxy has seen it dozens of times over the past few million years. Dr. Chin activated a small device that projected a holographic star map above the table. It showed the galaxy as Zethkar had never seen it, not as territories controlled by various empires, but as a complex web of connections and interactions. The hegemony controls approximately 18,000 star systems, she said, highlighting them in red. The Void dynasties control 12,000. The Crystal Alliance has 9,000. All told, the major empires control about 60,000 systems. Zitkar nodded. These are figures he knew well. There are over 400 billion star systems in the galaxy, Dr. Chun continued. Which means all the great empires combined control less than 0.02% of available space. And yet you're all fighting over the same territories, the same resources, the same primitive worlds to conquer. The hologram shifted, showing vast regions of unexplored space, areas rich with resources and potentially habitable worlds that no empire had ever bothered to investigate. The architect's question, Dr. Martinez said, is simple. Why are spacefaring civilizations so obsessed with conquest when there's an entire galaxy waiting to be explored peacefully? Zethkar stared at the hologram. The scale of unexplored space was staggering. In all his years of military service, he had never questioned why the hegemony focused on conquering inhabited worlds rather than colonizing empty ones. It was simply how things were done. What are you proposing? He asked. A test, Dr. Chin said. The same test the architects have been offering for millions of years. They want to see if galactic civilization can evolve beyond the conquest model, if species can learn to cooperate instead of dominate. And if we pass this test, Dr. Chun smiled, then the galaxy changes. The architects left more than just defensive systems, Commander. They left tools for exploration, for terraform dead worlds, for peaceful expansion on a scale that would make current empires look like neighborhood squabbles. But those tools only activate for species that prove they can work together. The shuttle shuddered slightly as it undocked from the Dominion's edge. Through the viewport, Zethkar watched his flagship drift away, still dark except for life support systems. My crew, he said suddenly. My fleet. What happens to them? They'll be fine, Dr. Martinez assured him. Earth is preparing supplies for your ships, food, medical supplies, recreational materials. Your crews can stay as long as needed while you decide what to do next. And one of my options. Dr. Chin's expression became serious. You can return to hegemony space and report this encounter. Tell them that Earth is protected by ancient technology and not worth the cost of conquest. We won't interfere with that choice. Or you can stay and learn. Spend time with us, with the other protected worlds. See what cooperation looks like instead of domination. When you're ready, you can return to the hegemony as an ambassador rather than a conqueror. Zethkar thought about his career, his rise through the military ranks, the pride he had felt in serving the great hegemony. Then he thought about his powerless fleet, disabled not by superior weapons, but by technology so advanced it could selectively shut down aggressive intent. There's a third option, Dr. Chin added quietly, which is some of your crew might choose to stay permanently, to join the project. The architect's plan requires representatives from all galactic civilizations, even the conquering ones. If the test succeeds, someone needs to be able to speak to the Hegemony High Command in terms they'll understand. 6 months later, Commander Zethkar stood in the same place on the bridge of the Dominion's edge, but everything had changed. His ship now served as a diplomatic vessel, one of the first official ambassadors between the hegemony and what was now known as the Protected Worlds Alliance. Half his fleet had chosen to return to hegemony space with a report that Earth was defended by unknown ancient technology and should be classified as a forbidden system. The other half had stayed to study, to learn, and to prepare for what Dr. Chun called the next phase. Through the viewport, Earth looked the same as it had 7 months ago when he had first arrived with conquest on his mind. But Zethkar's understanding of what he was seeing had transformed completely. The blue marble below wasn't a primitive world waiting to be conquered. It was part of a network of civilizations that had been quietly preparing for galactic transformation for millennia. Commander, Vix Tao called from the communication station. She was one of the crew members who had chosen to stay and learn. We're receiving a transmission from the Hegemony High Command. Put it through. The main screen showed Admiral Korthvan, Zethkar's former superior. The old soldier's expression was unreadable. Commander Zethkar, the Admiral began, your reports have been disturbing. The High Command requires clarification on several points. Zethkar had expected this communication for months. What clarification do you require, Admiral? You claim that Earth possesses defensive technology beyond our capabilities. You report that an entire fleet was disabled without weapons fire. You request permission to establish permanent diplomatic relations with a species that our intelligence classified as primitive. Explain. Zethkar looked around his bridge at crew members who had spent months learning about cooperation instead of conquest, about exploration instead of domination. Some of them were working alongside human advisors, sharing knowledge that was transforming their understanding of galactic civilization. Admiral, he said carefully, I recommend you send a small diplomatic vessel to Earth. Come and see for yourself what we've discovered. But come in peace, with genuine diplomatic intentions. The consequences of approaching this system with hostile intent are educational. After the communication ended, Dr. Chun materialized as a hologram on the bridge. The technology still amazed Zethkar. Not the hologram itself, which was simple enough, but the fact that it was being generated by systems that operated on principles his scientists were only beginning to understand. How did it go? She asked. They're sending a diplomatic mission, he replied. A small one. They're curious but cautious. Good. Curiosity is the beginning of wisdom. She paused, studying his expression. Any regrets, Commander? Zethkar looked out at the stars, at a galaxy that now seemed far larger and full of possibilities he had never imagined. Only that it took the threat of conquest to teach me there was another way, he said. Dr. Chun smiled. The architects were patient teachers, Commander. They knew that most species would only listen when they had no other choice. The important thing is that you're listening now. In the distance, more ships were approaching Earth. Not hegemony vessels, but craft from other civilizations that had heard rumors of the impossible world, where conquest failed and cooperation succeeded. The network was growing, and somewhere in the vast galaxy, ancient observers were noting that their long experiment was finally approaching its conclusion. The test was almost complete.